This is Join Us in France, episode 382, 382. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we talk about France, everyday life in France, great places to visit in France, French culture, history, gastronomy, and news related to travel to France. Today, I bring you a conversation with Brian Gmutza about how to travel smart in 2022. Is a trip to France even a good idea in 2022? There is a lot of uncertainty, and some of us are more risk-averse than others. But there are things you can do to make your travel plans resilient, and these are also things that make for a better trip, no matter what year it is. This podcast is supported by donors and listeners who buy my tours and services, including my very popular itinerary consult and my self-guided GPS tours of Paris that make for a very easy trip to Paris. You can browse all of that at Annie's Boutique, joinusinfrance.com/boutique. And another great way to stay in touch with travel and podcast news, and with this podcast, is to sign up for the newsletter at joinusinfrance.com/newsletter. And I finally sent a newsletter out. It had been too many weeks. And the main theme of this newsletter was the best festivals that we have in France that are planned for 2022. It turns out that there are a lot of them in a lot of places. And if you know about them in advance, maybe you'd like to plan for a visit to one of those beautiful festivals that we have. Bonjour, Brian Gmutza, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk about, things that we can do to make good decisions when it comes to travel. Because these days, travel is complicated, I think. But a lot of us are itching to travel because we've been cooped up for a couple of years. And lots of us have travel credits that we have to use or we might lose them. But, the pandemic isn't quite done. It's done, but not quite. I'm not sure it ever will be completely done. And also, there's this war in Europe that broke out in Ukraine. So it's difficult to think it through and make smart decisions about what to do. Should we travel at all, or should we just stay home? So let's try and think it through. And you've had to make this decision yourself a few months back. And I'd like to know how you came to your decision to come to France anyway. And this was in December 2021, right?
Yes, we traveled on December 26th. And returned at the very beginning of January 3rd.
Right. So the situation was quite different because we still had a lot of COVID restrictions at the time. We still had, we had just implemented the vaccine pass and things like that. And all of that has gone away completely by now. So the situation has evolved a lot. But probably the things you did to make it a safe trip would be somewhat similar to what you would do today. In other words, how would you advise a friend of yours who is thinking of visiting France? What would you tell them is the right way to approach this?
COVID has changed a lot of the way I look at things, and I think the way a lot of people look at things as far as traveling is concerned. For one, I don't know that I would go anywhere anymore without booking refundable airfare and hotels, because you just never know what's going to come up. And that was the first question that I asked whenever I was booking a hotel is I would look to see what is the refund policy. Do you refund, how long out are you refunding? Is it a week? Is it a month? Mm-hmm. Understanding what those policies are from the very beginning before you ever put any money down. And then I also would prefer to book directly with the airline or the hotel rather than through a third party like Orbitz or hotels or Priceline or something like that, because if something happens and you do need to cancel, then my experience has been that the hotel directly or the airline are much more willing to work with you and be more flexible with you than if you have to go through a third party. Their response is going to be, well, you booked through Orbitz, you're going to have to take it up with them.
Right. And the same is true when booking trains for France, because a lot of people book through Trainline. But when you do that, you show up at the ticket counter at SNCF, and I don't know, I've never tried this, but I assume they're going to tell you, well, Trainline will refund you. So it's really hard to go through a third party if you're not sure that they'll take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's a bit unsettling about travel right now is that flight prices are quite high, as a matter of fact. And with the increase in oil prices, it's not going to get any easier. So I think it's possible that people will take more thought out trips. At least that's what I hope, that they will give it more thought. And I have certainly seen no lack of interest in my itinerary planning service. Lots of people are coming to France and it's just that they want to do it right. They want to really spend the time to think it through and do the right thing, which I think is a very good development, because there used to be a lot of people around Paris that had no idea what they were looking at or why they were here. They were just, it was just on their bucket list. And so they found a cheap flight and they came. That doesn't happen so much anymore, does it?
No, I think I agree with you. That's a wonderful development. I know on our trip, we were originally planning to spend some time in France, and then we were going to train over to London. And we were not able to do that because the COVID requirements changed in England. They were requiring a quarantine when you arrived, and that would have basically been our entire stay would have been quarantined in a hotel. So we decided to stay in France longer. And it was an excellent decision. We were we had a much more relaxed trip. We weren't running from one thing to the next. We were able to enjoy the city. We were able to make a day trip to the Normandy beaches, which we would not have had the time to do if we had not just decided to stay in France entirely. So it gave us the flexibility to do that. And, we were there when the Christmas markets were still going on. So we found that was something we went on our first day just to check it out and loved it so much. I think we went back 2 or 3 days in a row, just to eat lunch and check them out. And we did some shopping and those kinds of things, just kind of browsing in stores. Those are the kinds of things that, I don't think you get to do if you're, rushing from one museum to the next, or, rushing to get one item, a next thing off of your list. You're just kind of there to check the things off, as you said, and not really getting a full flavor of the culture, which I think is one of the most important benefits of traveling.
Right. So another thing that you can do to make your trip kind of more resilient, I guess, to make sure that if things happen, imagine, I don't know, that there's a new variant of this COVID that comes up, and that all of a sudden there's no restrictions being imposed. Well, first of all, it wouldn't happen overnight. But if you are here in France for a couple of weeks, you might get caught in that. It's possible. It's not likely, but it's possible. So what can you do to make that have less of an impact on your trip? Well, I think that you should choose activities that give you more freedom. There are people who, and I see this because I talk to a lot of people who are planning their trip to France. There are people who fill up their schedule with appointments every day of their trip. And that introduces a lot of complications if you need to make any changes. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that the choice is not between making appointments for every day or doing nothing. There are a lot of things you can do in between. And I talk to people who, they book a food tour and then a bike tour and a perfume making class and a wine tasting class. There's even wine making classes, if you can believe that, as if it's possible to learn how to make wine in a class, in a 2-hour class. They book a cooking class. There are people who feel like they should make an appointment with somebody. like a chauffeur or something. They need to have appointments. Their vacation looks like they are the CEO of Paris and they have meetings all day. And and I think you shouldn't do that on vacation, Like you're not in like it is so nice to be when you're on vacation to not have too many things that you must do. Now there are a certain number of things that you need to book in advance. But I think you should refrain from the temptation to make too many appointments when you're on vacation. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. I have been on vacations before where I return from my trip and I feel like I need a vacation from my vacation, and that's not good. That's not fun. So, and the thing is, you can, and I'm a planner. I like to have everything planned. I like to know what I'm doing. I like to have a agenda and everything. And I think that's important. I don't think I certainly wouldn't suggest somebody, fall down to France and just wing it for a week. But you just never know what's going to happen. Not this trip, but a prior trip that my wife and I had taken. We had plans to do everything. We knew what we were going to do, and we were going to do all these things. And then we discovered that the Seine was flooded. And so the Louvre was closed and the Musée d'Orsay was closed. And so then we found ourselves thinking, okay, well, what are we going to do now? We have all these plans, but we're going to do this on this day, this on this day. And you just never know, even with COVID being, not nearly the issue that it was a few months ago, still other things happen. And so I think the more flexible you can be, the better off your trip is going to be. We tried to maybe do something in the morning, and have something in the afternoon and have some time scheduled, just free time where we can kind of meander the streets and walk into little shops. And I know the first time we went to Paris, we spent some time in the Jardin Luxembourg and just watching people pushing the little boats along. And we had a little picnic there. And it's one of the things that 5, 6, 7 years later, we remember most about that trip. We don't remember necessarily the museums, although they're wonderful. But we remember those little moments of, we went to fromagerie and got a baguette and tried different cheeses that we'd never heard of. And, those are the things that we remember about those trips. It's not so much did we see this? Did we see that? It's those kind of small cultural moments that really kind of gave us the flavor of what the city and the culture is all about that we really remember.
Yeah. And, and to some people, feeling like they're busy is really important. That's part of their normal routine at work. They are busy all the time. And it kind of feels unsettling to go on a vacation and not have 10 things planned every day. But if you do plan 10 things every day, and especially if you try to do them all, then you will completely miss out on the simple things that in Paris are not complicated, such as walking into a shop and buying some bread and some cheese and trying it. And you don't even need to plan the what bread and what cheese. It's just going to jump at you because it's there. It's different. You can see it. You can smell it. And you're like, oh, I'll try this one. And does it really need to be this store rather than another store further down the road? Whatever strikes your fancy. This is the kind of loose vacationing where you can really enjoy yourself because there is no good reason to, schlep it across town to go to a specific bakery or a specific cheese shop when you have hundreds of them all over. So just pick one. It doesn't matter. So people need to be cognizant of their natural tendency to overplan sometimes. Now, the other thing that makes life simpler these days is apps, because there are a lot of apps that can help us get from A to B very easily without really thinking about it that much. So you could look on Google Maps, how long is it going to take between this place and this place, so more or less, how long it's going to take you. And then you can have Google Maps or City Mapper or something take you straight there. I mean, there's nothing to plan in advance. It'll just tell you. All you have to do is open the app and look at it. And it'll tell you, right?
That is correct. We used a lot of Google Maps to navigate ourselves around for walking. But I became aware of and really kind of relied heavily on the Bonjour app for the metro system there, and that's the official app that was used that is created by the Paris Metro, and it gives you real time information on which lines are open, which lines are closed, and all those kinds of things. So I found that was much more reliable than Google Maps. Google Maps was great if we were walking around and we wanted to get from this shop to this place. But when we were navigating the metro, we used the Bonjour app a lot. Hopefully the Tous Anti-COVID app is going by the wayside, but we clearly use that one a lot as well.
And this Bonjour app is great also if there's a strike, because people worry so much about strikes. But what happens when there's a strike is they just don't run all the trains or all the metros, but they usually don't close them down altogether. It's unusual. It can happen, but that's unusual. Usually all it means is the trains in direction of Strasbourg, well, there's just going to be, instead of 20 today, there's just going to be 10 of them. And so because some of the drivers are on strike and whatever, so fine. So if you have the app, it'll tell you which ones are running and which ones are not. And the real time is really important. So for the Bonjour app, it will really help you to see what's going on right now, because they do make announcements in the metro stations, but those are hard to understand sometimes, even for me, and I'm native French. So sometimes you're like, what did the guy just say? The other type of apps that are wonderful are all the apps that venues have put together. Like if you go to Versailles has a fabulous app. It's free. It contains a walking tour. It will know by GPS where you are. It will tell you what you're looking at. I do voice map self-guided GPS tours that are not free, but they're not very expensive. And they will also, it's like me taking you by the hand and telling you, okay, now you go here. And I tell you about the things you're looking at. And this is stuff you can do completely, like with no planning. You can just, like, there's nothing to cancel. If your plans have to change at the last minute, then you can still use these apps. It's free or cheap, and there's nothing to book or cancel. So I think those are great.
Yes, I absolutely agree. There are a lot of audio guides that are available. If you go to a museum or something, rather than booking a tour with an actual person, you can pick up an audio guide that is usually fairly inexpensive, and it's in most languages. So, if you're concerned about the language and you don't want to, you're not quite sure what you're going to be getting, most of them, you can get whatever language that you need, and they can provide you with plenty of information to give you a richer experience at the different sites without having to book a specific tour and meet at a specific time and those sorts of things, as you said.
Or just the fact that you have to call all these people, that you have to make all these arrangements. Whereas with an app, there's nothing to arrange. You just do it when you're ready, and that's... So it's important to not book so many things that if you have to cancel something, or if something happens one day, then that there's going to be a domino kind of effect, and it's going to really mess you up. Another thing that I think people should consider is that in times of uncertainty, it's easier if you stay in one place rather than zip around all over the creation. There are still people who ask questions on the Facebook group that I run for the podcast, that the only way they could do what they want to do is by using teleportation or something. Some people, a helicopter wouldn't be enough because they have no concept of how much time things take or how long it takes to go from A to B. And to them, they just have this list of things that they want to check off. And they don't understand if you tell them, no, that's a bad idea. And if you add the complications of a possible, disruption due to a strike, due to a pandemic, due to whatever, then it can really throw a wrench in the I don't know how to say that. What's the expression in English? You throw a wrench in the machine?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, that's something that I think is really important, is not to overplan so much. And some people are just really bad at that. They just don't want to hear it, that it's too much, and that they won't. As I get older, maybe it's the age, but I think I want to enjoy my day more than check off things off a list. And maybe it's younger people who just want to go and do all these things in a day. What do you think? Is it age, or is it just my personality?
I really agree with you. And I feel like, there's a tendency to book your schedule so much that you're spending so much of your trip in trains and traveling and all those kinds of things. And, if you look back on your trip and you spent, 3 or 4 hours here going, training to this place, and 3 or 4 hours here training to this place, you've kind of missed out on valuable opportunities where you could do something spontaneous or just check something out that kind of really allows you to get a flavor of the local culture or wherever that would be. Sometimes you do have to use transportation to get to certain places, and sometimes that is the best use of your time. But if you spend so much time traveling from point A to point B to point C to point D that you don't really get a chance to really enjoy the places once you're there, I think that could be a wasted opportunity.
Yeah. I mentioned the disruption due to strikes earlier, and those happen in France no matter when you come. I mean, strikes happen. And so one way to defeat that is to stay somewhere in an area of Paris where you're going to be quite happy, if there's a strike, to walk to something that you would like to discover, and that you don't need the train, to take. You don't need the metro to take you to the other side of the city, because it will make your life so much easier. Last time I was in Paris, there was a strike, and so we just walked. We just decided to do things closer, and we walked, and it was just fine. But if you're staying too far because you wanted to save $20, that can be counterproductive in the end.
And I found that you just notice really cool things that you may not see in a book or something like that when you're just walking around. I know we were there with my 2 older sons, and we were at the Christmas market at the Jardin Luxembourg Jardin Tuileries. And we were walking back to our hotel, and my son said, "What's that over there? Can we go check that out?" I don't know. Yeah, let's go check it out. So we walked over there, and just to see what it was. And we walked by this little shop. This looks interesting. Let's go in there and see what it's all about. And those are the kinds of things you don't necessarily get when you're taking a bus. So you're taking the metro from here, point A to point B, and you're kind of focused on getting from this event to this next event.
Yeah.
And you find that there are just interesting little things, little nooks, and we walked through some of the galleries. I had just listened to your podcast just before we left about the covered passages, and so I never even knew those existed. And we happened to walk by some of them and walk through, and we found these interesting little book vendors that were selling old books in English and French, and it was just a really cool experience just to kind of see what those covered passages look like. And those are the kinds of things you would never notice if you're taking public transportation from point A to point B all the time. We just happened to wander by and notice one. I said, Annie was talking about those. Let's go in and check that out. And we did, and it was really cool.
And honestly, if you don't stay somewhere central, it becomes a vulnerability in your plan, because all it takes is for the metro to go on strike and you're stuck. Because people sometimes think, I can go stay in the 10th arrondissement, or I can be in the 20th arrondissement. It's much cheaper that way. There's good reasons why it's cheaper, by the way. But the thing is, it's half an hour metro into the city. And if there's a strike, there you are in an area where there's really nothing nothing much. I mean, there's a few things, but you'll see, you'll be done very quickly. So that's a problem, because you've traveled all around, from the other side of the planet to see Paris, and you might get stuck in an area that's not so desirable. So I think don't, try to stay as centrally as you can in Paris, because that will always pay off. There's no situation I can think of where that would be a detriment, other than a little bit extra money, but not even that. I mean, not always anyway. And the last thing I want to mention is that I really wish people would not plan their trips based on things they read on Facebook or on Instagram or any other social media, because people go there to brag about this and that, and they often, when they pick photos that they are going to share, they're going to pick the most lovely photo that they have. And maybe they had a better time eating that bit of cheese that you were mentioning earlier, but they don't have a good photo of it. So they don't share that, you see? And so I really think that that's a bad way to plan your trip. It's better if you can learn a little bit about an area from a book, from a podcast, from people that you know who can tell you about it, rather than just based on things you see online.
Yes, I totally agree. And that's not to say, and I'll preface this by saying, you absolutely should go to the Louvre. I love the Louvre. I love the Musée d'Orsay. I love the going in the Eiffel Tower. We did all of those things. But one of the things that we did that we really enjoyed is we're big fans of international soccer. And so my son said, do they do a tour of the Parc des Princes, the Paris Saint-Germain's, the football club's stadium? And I said, well, I don't know. Let me look. And so I Googled it, and they did. So we went out there. I'd never read about it in any book or seen anything about it. We went out there, and it was one of the things that we all agreed we loved the most.
Yeah.
We got to tour the stadium and take wonderful pictures and those sort of things. And I never read about that anywhere. It was just something because we're fans of soccer like that. And my son just asked the question, well, can we do that? Sure. We did. And we checked it out, and it was really wonderful. Les Invalides, the Napoleon's tomb, and the Musée de l'Armée. They are things that, a lot of, you read about it in a book, but it's usually a page or two or something like that. We found they were really interesting. They weren't heavily touristed. We got to really kind of walk around and enjoy them. So I think about what you like to do, and what your family enjoys doing might not be the same thing as what the people who are writing the books and the guides and doing the Facebook pages and the Instagrams and all those kinds of things are wonderful. I'm an amateur photographer. I enjoy getting the pictures and those sort of things. So I wouldn't knock that at all. But for me, I think there's a lot of value in just the experience of what it's like in the culture, and there's some value to me in going to a little market and just checking it out and shopping and doing as the locals do. I think there's for me, going over to a country like France is not about just going over and having a set of pictures to bring back. It's more about experiencing the culture and seeing what it's like in some place that's different from mine. It gives me a much better perspective on what life is like or outside the rest of the world. We tend to be very inwardly focused here in the United States, and things are as much as they are similar in other places, there are differences there that I think are really wonderful and make for a really rich experience if you're willing to give yourself the permission to leave yourself some flexibility and just say, we're just going to go have a little picnic or we're just going to wander the streets and see what looks interesting. Even if you do want to book and do all the things, finding some time to just spend an hour and wander a little bit, I think, to me, those are the things that me and my family, we think about and we remember those little memories much more than, did we see La Joconde? Did we see all the things that you say that you have to do when you're in Paris and those kinds of things.
Yeah. And also, if what you get enjoyment out of is simple little everyday things like that, then really it's unlikely that anything is going to come disrupt that. But you have to put yourself in a situation where you take the time to enjoy the little things, or they're never going to happen, you know? So, do you think that because of this pandemic, because of this whole last 2 years, are you going to be traveling differently going forward? Or is it just a matter of, oh, well, just get travel insurance or, you know, make sure your tickets are refundable? Are there other things that which of course you should do, by the way, but are there other things that you think you will do differently going forward?
I do. I do think that there's, I really do think I've seen the value in this past experience in spending more time in fewer places. Rather than booking the week-long trip and I'm going to do 2 days in London and 3 days in Paris and 3 days in, this place or whatever. I think I've kind of seen the value of being able to set down roots in a place for 5, 6, 7 days and just being able to explore that city a little bit more, take some day trips outside of that. I know when we went to France this time, we went to Léger, which is a small skiing village in the Alps, and we had the best time. My wife absolutely fell in love with it. She has not stopped talking about it. She's like, I want to go back so badly. It was so wonderful. It's off the beaten path. It's in no book. We just happened to take a look at a place where we wanted to try skiing, and we loved it. So there are other places, and for me, being in that place, where French is a little bit more prevalent, English is a little bit more difficult to come by. My French is passable at best, but I was able to manage. And so that's given me more comfort that I could go to a less traveled city rather than something, bigger and explore and feel comfortable being able to get around and those sort of things. So I think that's something that I would like to do, especially as far as France is concerned, is to get out and see different areas of the country, smaller areas where it's not so heavily touristed and, experiencing the culture and getting a chance to interact with people in a way that you don't necessarily get if you're jetting in one day and hitting all the museums in 2 days and then you're out the next and on to the next place.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's music to my ears because I really enjoy all of France. I love Paris, as you know, and I love reading about Paris and I love learning about the history of Paris and writing tours about Paris. But the rest of France has so much to offer. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, I had ordered a book about kind of quirky little villages in France. And a lot of them are not very far from where I live. So I think I'll try and go discover them and talk about them on episodes because these are not things that how would you find out? Like, unless you take the time to go where your inclination take you. Like, if you really enjoy skiing, well, try skiing in France. And like you did, you found something that you really enjoyed. And if you really enjoy, I don't know, you have a particular hobby, like if you like sailing, well, go to places where there are lots of little sailing boats and where you can sail with French people. That sort of thing is very, I don't know, it means so much more than just getting a museum pass and seeing all the museum in 3 days because I have free entry in 3 days, so I got to rush. I don't think that really... that doesn't make for a great vacation, in my opinion. So, another piece of advice that I haven't brought up, but it probably should be mentioned, is that if you are worried about stuff like, I don't know, terrorism or this war in Ukraine or things like that, you can sign up for the State Department alarms. They like... I guess they're called State Department alerts. I'm not sure what they call it. But if you sign up, they will send you emails letting you know that maybe Americans should lay low in the next couple of days in this part of the world or whatever. I haven't found their alerts to be real, I don't know. Sometimes they're a bit alarmist, but if that's something that will reassure you, maybe it's worth doing in these times of trouble, I guess.
Yes, that's definitely something that we did. We looked at the State Department guidelines. Of course, France was a level 4 do not travel when we went, but I think pretty much everywhere was a do not travel. But the way we looked at it was, as far as COVID conditions were at the time, our local community was worse than France. So we thought it can't be any worse than where we live. And they also mentioned, a risk of terror attacks and those sorts of things. And just before we left, my son's goes to a university, and at his university there was a hostage taking there, and somebody was barricaded in a building there, and all those kinds of things. And so, there's going to be risk no matter where you go, and everybody's tolerance for risk is going to be, it will be different than the next person's. And so I think it's worth thinking about, what your own personal level of risk tolerance is. Are you, willing to accept some? Are you not willing to accept some? And then think about, where you go. I know the first time when we went to Paris, there had been some terrorists. There's been attacks. I don't remember which one it was. There was some issue that was there. We were walking around the Eiffel Tower, and there were a lot of soldiers with, big weapons and those sort of things. And so if that's the kind of thing that is kind of unnerving and unsettling to you, then maybe that's something you think about. Now, this last time we were there in December, it was very much not the case. And at no point have we ever felt unsafe at any time that we've been in France. No matter where, we take reasonable precautions with our money and our valuables and bags and those sort of things. And that's a conversation we had with our older boys when we went, is being aware of your money and, not putting your phone out on the table when you're eating outside, and, just reasonable precautions that you would take anywhere, anytime you travel. But each person's individual risk tolerance is going to be different. And so, I think certainly do research and look into what you might expect and what the risks are, and decide for yourself as an individual and as a family if that's acceptable for you. Because I also don't think it's good to go to a place and be scared and be uncomfortable all the time. That's not a good experience for anyone. So, if you feel like you're going to go and be uncomfortable or feel unsafe, maybe you wait a little bit until things settle down or whatever.
Right. But on the other hand, it's kind of a shame if you have travel credits that are about to expire. If you have if you have to use your plane tickets or you'll lose them, well, you might as well, go, I think. I wouldn't waste tickets just because I'm a little worried, because things can happen at home too. It's not like it doesn't matter where you are. I'm sure there are adverse events. I mean, there's tornadoes and there's mass shootings and there's, sure, in America you don't have strikes, but you have other sorts of disruptions that, so nowhere is totally safe. It's just a matter of putting things into perspective. It probably feels more scary because it's not what your daily routine is. So you put up with a lot more danger possibly in your daily life just because it's normal to you. But thinking of doing that somewhere else, all of a sudden you're very worried about it. But it's maybe the danger is not that big anywhere else.
Yes, we went to France in the height of a pandemic in Omicron, so our tolerance for risk was a bit higher than it might be for other people. But yeah, I definitely think it's worth looking into. And as I said, we never at any time felt unsafe for anything as far as terrorists or anything like that. We never even really felt unsafe with pickpockets. I read a lot of people, Paris is one of the worst places for pickpocketing and those sort of things. We never felt any of that, with reasonable precautions. You don't go in blindly, but you take reasonable precautions. I think you would certainly be fine. So
and it might happen to you, but if it does, and you've taken your precautions, meaning you don't have all your stuff, in your pocket, then even if they take some stuff from you, it's not going to be the end of the world. You can prepare for those things. Like make sure you have Find My Phone, enabled in your phone, so that from your Apple account or your Google account, you can disable your phone pretty much. And you can eliminate any sensitive information that you don't want other people to have. Well, you can do that at a distance. You just need to plan for it. But you might need that at home just the same as you might need it in France. So that's just good kind of policy. That's good stuff to do all the time, not just when you're traveling.
For sure. I totally agree.
Yep. Do you have other things that you want to mention that I forgot to bring up, or did we kind of beat this horse to death?
No, I think we covered most everything. I totally would recommend traveling. I think there's a lot, as you said, there's a lot of pent up demand for travel, and I know we were very much itching to travel. This one a thing that me and my family and love to do, and so we were really itching to do that. And I think now is a wonderful time if you've been concerned about COVID requirements and all the different things, the different hoops you have to jump through to travel. I think those are falling by the wayside. By the week, things are changing for the better as far as those are concerned. I think it's a wonderful time to travel and to get back out there.
Yeah. And, the biggest caveat that I would give people is don't plan so much. Like, don't have so many appointments every day, because, if there's a disruption, you'll bear the brunt of it. But if you kept it loose, you'll be fine. You'll just go, I can't do that today. I'll do it tomorrow. No problem. And enjoy each day for what it can be instead of rushing so much.
There's so much to enjoy and to experience in Paris and other parts of France that doesn't involve an admission fee. And so, I would absolutely agree with you in that, and to take advantage of those. Absolutely do the things, go to the museum, go in the Eiffel Tower, go to the top of the Arc de Triomphe, do all of those things. But find some time to, go to the Jardin Luxembourg and rent one of the little boats, and you can push them along with a stick, and, get a sandwich, croque monsieur, and sit on a bench and watch people watch for a little while, grab a coffee. And, we got several different, we went to a small little shop and got several little desserts, and we all sampled each one, and we, tried to decide which one we liked the best. And, just those are the sort of things that, that really, in my personal opinion, I believe those are the things that are the best memories that you make from those places. I love art and those kinds of things. And I think it's important to see those things, and I appreciate seeing them, but those smaller cultural experiences that really give you a flavor of what it's like in a country, I think are the things that are often overlooked if you overschedule yourself.
Well, and if you come to France with your kids, young kids, and you go to the grocery store and you pick out some scary food, and you just see if they'll dare taste the scary foods. And of course, a lot of stuff is going to look scary to them because it's different from, it just looks different to them. They've never seen this stuff. They're not going to forget that. This is things that you can make it really, really enjoyable for them. But you just have to take the time to go to the store, and, it's totally unplanned. And you don't need to go to any specific store either. It could be any of them. Like, just go with your kids and look around and double dare them, double dog dare them to try this stuff. You'll see, they might surprise you.
We did just that. We went to a grocery store. We picked out several different kinds of candy. We took it back to the room and each tried a different piece and all that kind of stuff. And we found some things we liked so much. We're looking on Amazon to see, can we order it? How much would it be to ship it over to us? So yeah, those are the things that when I look back on trips, we think about, oh, remember when we had this and that was so good, or can you believe that this is what this tasted like? And as I said, when we went to the fromagerie and tried the different cheeses, my wife and I are still these years later trying to think, what was that cheese that we ate? Oh, that was so good. I can't remember what it was called. I wish we'd written it down. Those are the things that we remember. We don't necessarily remember, oh, we stood in this line to, get into this museum or whatever.
Yeah.
We remember those kinds of small events.
Yeah.
Those little things, even when you make a mistake with the language or something like that, those are the kind of things that we remember and we laugh about. They're family jokes that we have. Oh, remember when this happened? And, we laugh about it. So just have a little flexibility, get out, be willing to step out of your comfort zone a little bit. Enjoy what the culture has to offer.
And, it's all good and fine to go to a wine tasting and to do all these nice activities with a bunch of other people. But you could just go to the grocery store and, buy a really cheap bottle of wine and buy a middle and an expensive one. And then you taste them and you see, just try things like just normal life. This is how French people do it too. We go to the store and we're like, oh, I'll try this one today. We'll see, and it's very fun. And it doesn't have to be, what I'm trying to say is if you don't schedule so much, you will actually have time you will have to fill your time with small things that are very meaningful in the end. All right, Brian, we've been talking for a while, so thank you so much for coming on the podcast with me. I hope you have a wonderful time next time you come to France.
We will definitely be back. I really appreciate your willingness to talk. It's been wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Annie.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Again, I want to thank my patrons for supporting the show and giving back. Patrons get several exclusive rewards. For doing so, you can see them at patreon.com/join us, Patreon, join us, no spaces or dashes. Thank you all for supporting the show. Some of you have been doing it for a long time. You are amazing. And a shout out this week to new patrons, Beth Murphy, Rhonda Coley, Anne-Marie Jill, Charlene Long, and Alice. Thank you so much for becoming patrons and making this podcast possible. This week, Elise and I released a video update to our patrons. I think we'll start to record some of our chit-chats in French as well for patrons, because there are a lot of patrons who are trying to learn French. And so, but we'll keep those short. Don't worry. It's not going to be a lecture. It's just going to be chat. Many thanks also to Marielle Slater, Leslie Mehigan, Lachlan Cook, Casey Armistead for sending in a one-time donation by using the green button on any page on Join Us in France that says Tip Your Guide. I mentioned in another episode that some of my emails are getting caught in the Gmail spam filter because, they're using artificial intelligence, in quotes, intelligence, and it doesn't turn out to be all that smart. So sometimes things get caught in the spam filter, and the only way I can find those emails is to look through my spam, and well, that's never a good experience, let me tell you. So I'll do it once in a while, but a lot of these people who had sent me a tip, I just missed it. But I want you to know that if you bought tour codes or an itinerary session and you don't hear from me within 24 hours, do pipe up because, send me another email, because I always respond to donors and to purchases from customers. So, another way to get to me that works fairly well is through Facebook Messenger, because I do check Facebook at least once a day, and we use Messenger in our own family. So I'm clicking on that message button for other things anyway. So I will see if there's a message request. And I also want to thank Terry Stroman for her donation. Terry wrote, "Merci beaucoup for the excellent itinerary advice. I just got your audio tours. We leave in a few weeks, and I feel very well prepared to relax and enjoy the city of light. Yes, I think you are very well prepared, Terry, and I wish you a wonderful trip. It's always lovely when buy a tour and then say, your tours were so good, they were too cheap, I'm just going to send you some money, or an itinerary planning, and I'm like, oh, you're not charging enough for those. Here, have a little more, which is always very nice. You don't have to do that, but when you do, I notice it, and it's very nice. A few people have asked me what's happening with the French Immersion Week that I've talked about on and off. There is a lot of interest in sharing such a week together, but sadly it's not going to be this year, but it's still in the tubes for next year. Hosting an event like this requires a lot of organization, and there was too much of uncertainty due to COVID this year, but I think hopefully things will continue to calm down, and next year we might be able to pull something like that together. I would certainly really enjoy doing that. A week from today is May Day in France, but everywhere is the 1st of May. So I want to remind you that on the 1st of May, a lot of things will be closed in France. The thing that visitors notice the most is public transportation. It's normally completely closed. So on the 1st of May, if you're in France, you should plan on walking wherever you're going. There will be taxis and there will be Uber, but they are going to be very busy and the prices are going to be higher. And this year, the 1st of May is on a Sunday, and this is a fixed holiday. So if it falls on a Sunday, that's the holiday, is the Sunday. Even if you normally get the Sunday off, well, you don't get an extra day off because it fell on a Sunday. So next Sunday is going to be particularly quiet because people won't be able to use public transportation in big cities. But there are more and more companies that decide to open. Even big malls will be opened. Of course, the hotels and most restaurants do not close. Some of the mom and pop shops will close, but a lot of stuff will remain open. Usually the bottleneck is public transportation because there will be hardly anything. In Paris, I think they have very little on May Day. And in Toulouse, they have zero, not a bus, not a metro, nothing. So just on the 1st of May, plan on walking. It's a lot easier. Several museums in Paris are honoring Yves Saint Laurent on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of his first collection. The museums are displaying his best pieces, which are wonderful. There's a lovely mix of fashion and art. You can see 20 of his iconic pieces in the Modern Art Museum of Paris. Lots of other museums are also displaying things. They've decided to kind of spread out this exhibit. It's not all in one place. It's a little bit in all the museums. So if you're in Paris this month and next, you might see some really lovely Yves Saint Laurent stuff. And it turns out he got a lot of his inspiration from painters and from nature. And so they juxtaposed some painters that he kind of imitated in his work. And it's really fun to see. The presidential campaign is in full swing. All the candidates are putting on events. It's not quite as heated as most years because Emmanuel Macron has so much in the polls. He's so far ahead that it's going to be really hard for anybody else to win unless people don't vote. And then, of course, all bets are off. But it's not a very exciting campaign this year because, the guy's going to get reelected and I'm not going to be sad about that. I think he's done a fine job. For my personal update this week, the wind has stopped. The sun has come out. Hooray! Well, there's still a bit of wind on and off, but at least it's not day in and day out like it was earlier in the month. This morning, when I opened my shutters, it hit me that the only thing I could hear was the sound of birds and how lucky I am to live in such an environment. I don't have a fancy house. I don't live in the most gorgeous village in France, but it's comfortable, it's safe, and this time of year, the birds are really chirping very happily, and I could not ask for anything more. Earlier today, I went on a barge on the Canal du Midi to talk to a friend of my husband's who spends a lot of his time on the canal, and he will share his experiences and tips on how to best enjoy this part of the southwest of France. And while I was there, I also met an American couple who also lives on the canal full time, and I will try and get an interview with them. So I'm always busy trying to find really interesting episodes to put out for all of you. Show notes for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/382, the numeral, where you can see a recap of what we've discussed. And of course, if you enjoy the show, I would really appreciate if you would tell a friend about this podcast and tell them why it would help them plan their trip to France as well. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. And if you don't hear back, do send me a message request on Facebook. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join me next time so we can look around France together. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2022 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.